Hello and welcome to Matters of Mind. My name is Thomas, and this is my series where I review books on Jordan Peterson's great book list. Today I'm going to be talking about The Sacred and The Profane by Mircea Eliade. I hope, but I doubt that I pronounced that correctly. So if you haven't already, please like and subscribe. It's incredibly helpful to the channel, and I'm going to jump right into it. So first of all, I want to start with an outline of the structure of the book and the purpose of the book. Now, the subtitle, The Nature of Religion, that really gives you an idea of what he's trying to do. And it's as if he's looking at modern man and then looking at ancient man and helping us to utilize what we know and what we're used to today to help understand the mind of ancient man, or as he calls him, homo religiosus. And I think that's a nice way to think of it, because there's a lot that goes into physical evolution, and we're used to seeing the differences in the changes of our bodies and our faces and our heads when we think about evolution. But there's another aspect of evolution that we don't always think about, and that aspect is the psychological changes, the spiritual changes that human beings have gone through along with and in parallel with our physical evolution. So the way he sets up the book mostly is by talking about three major ideas: sacred space, sacred time, and sacred nature. In each of those three categories, he gives you an idea of how ancient man, homo religiosus, saw time, space, and nature, and how we see it today. But he also brings in some things that we still do today that are echoes of that past. So with sacred space, the idea is, unlike modern man, ancient man sees space as non-homogeneous, meaning that it's not just like a big piece of graph paper in the way that we see land today. If you're looking at a map and it's separated by rivers and streams and mountains, and it's not just that. Ancient man also sees the difference in places as being sacred or not, and I'll get into some details there. Similarly, with nature, ancient man sees nature, and I'll quote here, as the manifested modalities of the sacred in the very structure of the world and cosmic phenomena. What he means by that is that the nature of nature itself is actually a reflection of the transcendent nature of God, the gods, or being itself. So when you look at nature and study nature, that's a way of getting to know God. And then sacred time. The interesting thing with sacred time is that for ancient man, it's not strictly linear. Any time that ancient man has a ritual, a religious ritual, like maybe like we would have today with Passover, anything that we do on an annual basis, Christmas, etc., he sees it not just as celebrating something that happened in the past, but bringing that thing that happened in the past into the present. All right, now I'm going to hone in on sacred space. So remember, the idea with sacred space is that space is non-homogeneous. It's not like they're looking at a map and seeing that everything's the same. There are differences in places, as not necessarily the material makeup of those places, but the significance of those places. And he provides a couple good examples. One of them is the story of Jacob. When he falls asleep in the desert wilderness and he puts his head on a stone, using it as a pillow, that's when he dreams about Jacob's ladder. And also important to remember about this story is the idea and the vision or the image of a ladder. Remember, it's going up, and in that story, up is heaven and down is hell, and there's beings traveling up and down between the two spaces. So when he wakes up, he then decides that that place, that stone, is sacred, and he covers it with oil. So he makes sacred something that in itself, materially, is quite plain. It's just the stone. But he imbues that stone with the idea of the sacred, making that a place of orientation from which he will then explore the rest of the world. Now, the Arunta tribe in New Zealand does something similar. They've got a stick that they walk with when they're traveling, and whenever they find a new place that they want to claim as their own, they stick the stick into the ground, and that becomes their sacred space. And similar to Jacob's ladder, it's also something that rises up towards the heaven away from the ground. It's always something that's vertical as opposed to the horizontal plane of the earth. And it's also important, and he relays this in the book, to understand that when ancient man is doing this, it's a way of hearkening back to creation. So if you remember the creation story in the Bible, it's not just about light and dark and God comes down and creates the world. If you pay attention to it, it's really a way of looking at the world as chaos. So the form and the void, or lack of form and void that existed before the creation, I think the term is tohu vabohu. What it is referring to is just like a formless mass. And through identification of light and dark and day and night and man and woman, sea and land, what the God in the Bible is doing is taking a chaotic form and putting order into it. So all of the creation story can be reflected in a lot of these stories where it's like a microcosm of creation itself. So when Jacob makes that stone sacred, he is essentially creating a new world for himself. That's his first point of orientation. And that's the way that he places order into the chaos of the wilderness. The Arunta tribe in New Zealand, when they place that stick in the ground, what they're doing is claiming that place is sacred. They're creating some order, and everything around there, which is chaotic, they're bringing into an ordered space. It's a form of creation, just like the creation story. And we still do something like this in modern times, but we sacralize it. We make it profane in the sense that we don't identify any spiritual essence with it. But if you see the Iwo Jima, when the flag raising at Iwo Jima, you'll notice that, or think about what's happening there. As they raise the flag, it's like the stick, it's like the stone. It's something that rises away from the earth toward the heavens. And they could simply just put a flag right there on the ground, but they don't. They put it on a pole and they raise it up to the top of the pole. So already you have the similar thing where you have Jacob's ladder that rises up, you have the Arunta tribe stick that rises up, and then you have a flag that rises up. And what happens at Iwo Jima is that's a sense of creating some order in the chaos of war. It's a symbol that we now own this place for all to see, and that symbol forces us to look up towards the heavens, and from that point outward is how we start creating order out of the chaos that is existing at the moment. What Eliade does from there is go through time, and he goes through the sacredness of nature and does very similar things, to where he compares what we do today to what ancient man did and helps us to understand that thought. And that's what I found most helpful with this book. It's a reminder that it's not just our physical bodies that are evolving, it's also our psychology, our mind, our sense of spirit, our spirituality that is evolving as well. And a lot of the things that they were doing, we're still doing today, but we just don't think of them as religious acts. So it's really imbued me with a sense of empathy towards what ancient man thought and how he saw the world, and realizing that we're not so far away from what he's doing. There's also the question of progress, and whether or not separating the sacred and the profane and making the world less sacred is actually a mark of progress. So with modern men, it almost seems as if once we got on board with the scientific revolution, it was as if the way forward was to reduce the amount of the sacred and make everything profane by saying nothing is magic, nothing is meaningful, everything is simply just what it is. A stone is a stone, a tree is a tree. And the problem with that, though, is if we are making everything profane and saying that nothing is sacred, where does it stop? A lot of the concept of Western civilization is founded upon the idea that human beings themselves are sacred, as stated in the Declaration of Independence. When we say that these rights are self-evident, they're not necessarily self-evident, and it wasn't always that way. The concept of being self-evident is that every individual is sacred, and we have to treat them as such. But as we progress and we start to look at nature and identify progression with the desacralization of everything that used to be sacred, who's to say that it won't stop at human beings, or that it will stop at human beings? At some point, we have to ask that question: are human beings sacred? And if not, then what's to stop us from treating other human beings as anything but simply a piece of material? So thanks again for joining me today. I hope this is helpful in helping you decide whether or not this is a book that you'd be interested in reading. If you do read it, or if you have read it, please let me know what you thought in the comments, and I hope we can have that conversation down there. If you haven't already, please like and subscribe. I really appreciate that, and I'll be back soon with some more content. Have a great day.